Good morning and welcome to the session 6 for the subject Urban Governance and Development Management. We had the session on Tuesday, September 5th. However, there was some issue with the recording of the live session. So, for that, I am re-recording the session with uh, just the questions that we discuss every week. So this session won't have live participants as the live session happened on 5th September, but the recording for that is not available. So I'll just be going over the questions uh, from the previous run of from week 6 of the previous run of this session. So that you can get a general idea of the questions, the kind of questions that you'll have to solve this week. Again, I won't be giving out answers for any of the questions as a lot of the questions that you are assigned this run are quite similar to the ones that were assigned previous run. So I'll just go over the subject material and the background material of the questions. I'll tell you the approach, how to solve the questions. I'll tell you what background material you need, how to approach the questions and how to go about solving them. But I won't give out the answers. So this is session 6 for week 6, and these are the lectures that have been covered so far. So first is the overview of municipal finance. In this you would have studied the different sources of municipal finance and different aspects of resource management, so investment management, asset management, and several other things related to management of municipal finance. Then you would have studied a little bit about the different issues that are faced in managing municipal finance and the roles that different organizations, governance organizations at the local level or the state level or other levels play at the municipal level. Then you would have studied alternate sources of municipal finance. In this, you would have studied about different alternative sources that municipalities can access to finance the municipal functions or several projects. You would have learned about bonds, borrowings, a little bit about public-private partnership or other different sources of financing municipal functions. Would also have studied a few examples of how public infrastructures are financed by municipalities. Then you would have studied municipal accounts. In this, you would have studied the municipal accounting system, the background of the municipal accounting system, the overview of the double entry accounting system, and a little bit about the national accounting manuals. Then you would have studied value capture financing. In this, you would study the concept and context of value capture financing, different value capture financing options that are available, and then a few real life examples where value capture financing has been used. Lastly, we would have studied public-private partnership in urban governance or PPP in urban governance. In this, you would have studied the concept of public-private partnership, what different options of public-private partnership or what different models of public-private partnership are available to finance the projects, the legal status of public-private partnership, and a few examples of how it manifests in real-life situations or to fund municipal projects. So this is what has been covered so far this week. So we'll start with our questions. So I've taken question first and second together because they are quite similar. So both the questions talk about the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and how the Constitutional Amendment Act determine and regulate financial aspects of the urban local government. So the first question asks, it's a true or false question, and it asks that 74th Constitutional Amendment Act does not delegate the power to determine and regulate financial aspects of ULBs to the state governments. Is it a true or a false statement? Then the second question asks you to choose the correct statement. And this you have four choices. First is that the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act does not provide the revenue-raising power to municipalities. So again, related to financial aspects of the ULBs outlined by the 74th CAA. Then it says 74th Constitutional Amendment Act was introduced in the year 1987, and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act deals with rural local self-governance. And finally, that the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act contains the powers, authority and responsibilities of Gram Panchayats. So, largely both these questions talk about the financial aspects that related to the ULBs that have been outlined by the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. So, for this, first we have to see that the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, it recommended the transfer of several governance functions from the state government to the urban government. So exactly 18 governance functions have been transferred by the 74th CAA, and you might know these functions or the transfer of these functions in a document called the 12th schedule. So including things like land use, economic development, water, roads and urban poverty alleviation, all of these functions have been devolved from the state government to the local government. Another thing which devolved was the authority. So earlier what happened that only a few bigger cities like Bombay or Calcutta used to have municipal governments, and otherwise all of the governance functions even at the local level were regulated by the state. So after the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act came, it also paved the way for direct elections to all urban local bodies every 5 years. So initially, this did not used to happen for every city or town, but only for some bigger cities or towns like Bombay and Calcutta, as I mentioned. So what this did was it created a mandate that now elections will be held for all municipal governments, not only in the larger city, and say the state appointees will serve as governing committee members in the administrative agencies of smaller. So this is what the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act actually devolved. However, uh, this was a general indication in the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, but the actual devolution of powers or the functions from the 12th schedule was left to the state discretion. So you might know or you might have observed that even though a lot of the functions have been devolved to this local governments, many functions are still performed by the state governments or parastatal bodies. Many functions of the 12th schedule out of many functions out of the 18 functions that have been devolved, they are still performed by either state government or a parastatal. So this is one thing that even after devolution of functions and authorities, actual devolution is left to the state discretion. Another thing is that the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act did not directly suggest principles for fiscal devolution to urban governments. Again, that was left totally up to the state governments, and each state was free to decide how financial or fiscal devolution was to be done in the case of the particular state or particular cities. What the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act does is that it prescribes that a state finance commission shall be established every 5 years by the state government along the lines of the Central Finance Commission, and the State Finance Commission will recommend resource distribution and mobilization methods for further fiscal decentralization of the state government to the local government. So essentially, the control over the fiscal devolution still lies with the state. There is no autonomy uh, for the local government in terms of fiscal devolution or having uh, their own fiscal resources which they can independently uh, allocate for projects or use. So revenue raising. So because of this, revenue raising and disbursement of funds for municipal finance is determined and regulated by the state governments, and no divisible pool of tax resources is there between the state and municipalities. The transfer to the municipalities, the transfer of funds to the municipalities is discretionary by nature, and this discretion comes from the state. And also the particulars of the municipal finance varies from state to state as each state decides the level of devolution and how the finance are to be allocated uh, city. So it varies from state to state, and then again it varies from city to city also. This happens because urban governments in India are structurally differentiated on the basis of size and level of economic development of the city. So bigger the city, the more bigger and more economically developed the city will have, or the municipal government will have more functions decentralized from the state to the city and more authority for performing those functions, and again more control over the financial aspects or the management of fiscal resources related to performance of municipal activity. You can see larger urban governments are vested with greater autonomy and wider responsibility. Traditional municipal functions, some of which have been taken over by the parastatals and specific purpose authorities, as I mentioned earlier also, that still a lot of the functions that have been devolved to the governments, the local governments, are still performed by parastatal agencies and specific purpose authorities. So because of this, urban local bodies face a lot of challenges in performing their uh, municipal functions, which then further sorry about that. So I was saying that uh, because of a lot of the challenges faced by urban local bodies, again because they're structurally differentiated and because they depending on the level of economic development and their size and their capacities available with them, they might face a lot of challenges, and because of that, again, there are a lot of challenges in delivering the municipal functions that are allocated to them. So these might include absence of adequate functional and financial powers of the urban local bodies, then their poor financial status, then the absence of adequate technical manpower, maybe absence of regular maintenance of infrastructure, and consequent higher operating costs. So a lot of the times for an urban local body to maintain infrastructure and maintenance of some particular facility, they have to have a really high operating cost to provide certain facilities to a smaller population or to a population at a lower level, which is comparatively more cost efficient if it were to be provided by an agency which is a parastatal agency or a specific purpose authority which already has the said infrastructure in place, and it could be easily or better performed or more cost efficiently performed by that agency. So in absence of regular maintenance of infrastructure and higher operating cost, also a lot of the times some functions of the urban local body are then performed by the parastatal bodies and specific purpose authorities. Also, sometimes it might incur high administrative and supervision charges. Again, because of that, sometimes the devolution of functions doesn't take place, and due to lack of capacity sometimes there are also a lot of losses that the municipality might face due to unaccounted for services like unaccounted for water, etc. So because of that again, there are serious challenges to devolution of power and fiscal resources to the urban. I have also added uh, two papers for further reading if you'd like to read that. So one paper is, I have added both of those papers here, the links for both of those papers here. So if you want to access, you can access from the links here. I could not add the papers to our shared folder because these papers are not open access ones. So I rather just discuss it a little with you, but I could not upload them. But I'll show them to you. We'll discuss it a little bit, so you know what the papers are talking about. And if you want to go into details, you can access those links. And if you have an institute access, probably you can get access to these papers. So the first paper is titled Urban Challenges in India, and it's a review of the recent policy measures. Basically, it's a review of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and the JNNURM and the impact they both had on devolution of uh, functions and authorities from the state to the local level and how that is working. So you can see here that uh, this paper examines India's urban governance and infrastructure challenges in the context of above mentioned policy initiatives, which is the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and the JNNURM. The paper focuses on two issues. First is the devolution of governance function and fiscal responsibilities to the local government, and second is civic development challenges. So in that we will be focusing largely on the devolution of governance functions and fiscal responsibilities. So you can see the first point that the paper mentions is that urban governance systems have not been decentralized uniformly across the country. This, as we just discussed, it's because the devolution was left at the discretion of the state, so it varies from state to state, and again it varies from city to city, as each of cities are organized differently based on their size and level of development. Second, it mentions that where administrative responsibilities have been devolved, the political economic factors translate into the states not assigning adequate revenue streams for local bodies to meet their expenditure responsibilities, thus limiting their de facto independence. Then it also says that the most local governments are unable to access private financial resources for infrastructure development due to inadequate management capacity and their own weak financial standing. Then it says that inadequate management capacity at the local level also hinders optimal utilization of infrastructure reform opportunities enabled by other programs like JNNURM, and especially this is the case especially in small towns. Again, you see here that while infrastructure and municipal deficits and socioeconomic inequalities pervade all urban centers, this paper clearly states that the impacts of these economic inequalities is disproportionately higher in the smaller towns. Also, many states are yet to implement the mandatory reforms related to devolution and accountability in governance. So, as you might remember in our previous discussions, we saw that JNNURM had two types of reforms, mandatory reforms and then optional reforms, or reforms that could or could not be taken by states. So even though one of the mandatory reforms of the JNNURM was the devolution and accountability in governance, still even after the 74th CAA and even after this mandatory reform suggested by JNNURM, many states have not taken up that reform and are still to implement the reforms of devolution and accountability. Again, the political economy factors and inadequate management capacity are the key challenges that impact effective government reform. So these are some points this paper suggests. Then it also shows you that the aggregated a table which shows the aggregated revenue and expenditure of urban local bodies in India. So you can see here it shows you the amount of revenue the local bodies generate, and you can see the total expenditure that is incurred by the urban local bodies in performing the local governance function. So you can see here very clearly that there is a stark difference between the amount of revenue that the local bodies can generate on their own and the amount that is actually required for expenditure in municipal function. And then you see uh, here the percentage of revenue support that the urban local bodies needed in order to perform the functions is shown here. So this is the percentage of revenue that they did not have on their own, but they had to seek it from somewhere else. So maybe from the state or from a centrally sponsored scheme or from any other resource to perform their function. So you can see even after the devolution of powers and functions by the 74th CAA, this percentage is steadily increasing over the years. So even after devolution of functions and responsibilities, there is no real financial or fiscal devolution, and the urban local bodies are having to rely more and more on revenue support from some external sources, as they don't have enough revenue support on their own. So if you want, you can further go into details and see how JNNURM and 74 CAA have impacted and what actual on-ground impact of these programs can be seen in Indian cities. Another paper which I have linked is this one. This paper tells you about the opportunities and struggles of decentralized government reform for urban municipalities in India. So it presents the situation of local governance structure in small and medium urban local bodies. So this is very important, as we saw the previous paper, that the failing in devolution of powers and responsibilities and fiscal resources is the most stark in small and medium urban local bodies. So this is a very good paper as it focuses largely on the small and medium bodies, and it examines from a micro perspective the capacities of small and medium urban local bodies in governing, managing and financing urban services for the local development. So this paper also mentions that the 74th Act has not yet been able to make an impact, especially on the lower tier local bodies or the municipalities and the Nagar Panchayats. Again, it is important to see that what criteria they have used for their evaluation. So first, they see their analysis in the institutional decision making of local government level was based on evidence from the functions performed by smaller and medium urban local bodies as per the 74th CAA. and they assessed it across several dimensions, of which there is first the functions. So devolution of functions, are they actually performing the functions that have been devolved to them under the 74th CAA or from the 12th schedule. Then can also get insights about devolution from their organizational setup. Then devolution of finances, then what functional constraints they might face, and then the municipal autonomy that they have. They've also taken into account the citizen participation and accountability as an aspect. You can see here, this shows all of the cities they have taken for the study. So you can see there that only one of these cities is class 1 cities. They have taken all of these cities from the state of Madhya Pradesh, and you can see there are two class 3 cities, several class 4 cities, and even one class 5 cities. So only Jabalpur as a municipal corporations, all municipal corporation, all other cities either have a municipality or a Nagar Panchayat. So this is done in order to really give you an idea of the functions and authority and the fiscal resources that have been devolved to small and medium sized cities in India. So you can see here, it gives you an outline for the functions that urban local bodies perform in Jabalpur district, and it shows that which of the functions that are mentioned in the 12th schedule, which of those functions are obligatory for the urban local body, so they are performed by the urban local body only, and which are discretionary, so even though they are to be performed by the urban local body, they are performed by some other body. So you can see here that urban planning and town planning, which is a function assigned to the urban local body from the 12th schedule, that is discretionary in nature, so it is not performed by the municipal corporation of Jabalpur district. It's discretionary in nature, and the function is being implemented by the TCPU and JMC together. Again, uh, you can see that urban forestry, protection of environment, and promotion of ecological aspects is another function that is assigned or devolved to the urban local body by the 74th CAA. But again, this function is discretionary in nature in the case of Jabalpur, and it's actually performed by the State Pollution Control Board. Similarly, you can see a lot of different examples. Many of the functions which essentially should be performed by the urban local body are still being performed by the state or parastatal agencies or some special purpose organization. And you can see all those remarks here in the case of Jabalpur. So this gives you a very solid idea of how even after devolution of functions, a lot of the functions are still not performed by the urban. Now again, uh, this table shows the same for all of the cities in this case study, and it shows the expenditure of services, and it shows if the function is performed by the municipal government or it's not performed by the municipal. So you can see in this example clearly that in case of Jabal, which is a larger municipal corporation, most of the functions are performed by the municipal corporation only. And going further, the municipalities still uh, a lot of the functions are performed by them, but you can see a large number of functions are not performed by the municipalities. And as you further, as the municipality or the size of the city gets smaller and In the case of Nagar Panchayats, a lot of the functions are not performed by the urban local bodies, but they are performed by trust. So this again gives you an idea of how many functions are performed in the city. Again, this table also shows you the inventory of tax instruments in urban local bodies. So this gives you an idea of how these different municipalities uh, get their revenue from different sources. So I hope this is again a helpful document for you to, if you want to read about uh, the devolution of functions and fiscal resources to the urban bodies. So I hope this helped you understand a little bit about the 74th CAA and how it has helped in determine and regulate the financial aspects of it. And I hope it helps you solve these both questions. Moving on to the next question, which is what is the full form of BOT in the context of financing infrastructure? You have been given four options: build, own, transfer, build, operate, transfer, borrow, own, transfer, and borrow, operate, transfer. So uh, you have studied, you probably have studied this your lectures, that there are a lot of alternate sources for funding of projects which the urban local bodies or even the state bodies sometimes access for financing the project. So that these finances can be accessed through loan financing. So loan financing from banks, from commercial banks, infrastructure banks, or municipal development funds, or through specialized intermediaries. Then you have the PPP model, or private sector participation, or public-private participation models, which you have different kinds of options like leasing, contracting, franchising, concession, service, management. You have things like BOO, BOOT, BOLT. So these are all different kinds of funding options, which I have mentioned in further slides. Or you have user pricing or service charge, etc. So you just add service or user charges on the services or infrastructure that is being provided by the urban local. So again, from the URDPFI guidelines also, you can see what alternate sources of funding for different kinds of projects are being accessed by urban local bodies. So, for example, for large infrastructure projects, you get funding by bilateral and multilateral agencies. You can have foreign direct investment. Can have public-private partnership. For city urban infrastructure, you can have grant in aid schemes. You can have public-private partnership. You can have loans from financial institutions. You can have municipal bonds or debentures. For social infrastructure, you can have funding by bilateral and multilateral agencies. You can again have municipal bonds or debentures. You can have grant and aid schemes. You can have PPP. You can have corporate social responsibility. For real estate projects, you can have foreign direct investment, municipal bonds and debentures again, or the options or loans from financing institutions. Again, this table you can find from the URDPFI guidelines. I have added the URDPFI guidelines in our shared folder if you want to take a look. Again, the URDPFI guidelines also shows you a little bit about different kind of models that are available in public-private partnerships. So there are supply and management contracts. Then there are turnkey projects, lease agreements, concessions provided by this government or state government to private partner, or also models where private ownership of assets is also there. So there are several types of PV models. So first, larger classification is where the public is the owner of the assets. is the private partner. The skills of the private partner are brought into service design and delivery, and also for operational control, labor management, and equipment procurement. However, the control of the public enterprise remains with the government or the public partner, not with the private partner. So things like management contracts, supplier service contracts, maintenance management contracts, operational management contracts, etc. are some examples of this. So I will not explain each of these models in details. I have provided a short description of each of these models, and I have provided this presentation to you. So you can go on to the description, and if you find some doubt, you can take it up again in the next presentation. However, I won't go into very detail about each type of the model. So again, uh, as a part of public ownership, or as a type of model in which public ownership of asset, there are other examples also. For example, there are turnkey projects, there are lease agreements, there are concessions or franchisees. Then there are BOT models, or build, operate, transfer models, in that there are several different uh, variations. Like for example, there is design, build, finance and operate, design, build, finance, operate, maintenance and transfer model. There is build, rehabilitate, operate and transfer model, BROT. There is design, build, operate and maintain, and then there are buy, build and operate, or BBO. That is build, own, operate and transfer, BOT, or build, transfer and operate, BTO, build and transfer, and bought annuity. There is also build, lease and transfer model, rehabilitate, operate and transfer. So rehabilitate occurs whenever there is some facility or some asset that already exists, and it has to be either refurbished or renewed or augmented in some way. So rehabilitate occurs, or rehabilitate in those cases. So there are two: rehabilitate, operate and transfer, and rehabilitate and operate. Again, there are models in which the ownership of assets is not public, it is private. So there are three kinds. First is build, own and operate. In this type, the private sector builds whatever asset or whatever infrastructure service is there. It owns that asset, and it operates that facility and sells the product or services to the users or the beneficiaries. There is also private finance initiative, or a PFI model. In this, the private sector is similar to the BOO models, owns and operates a facility, but the public sector purchases the service instead of the end user. So the public sector purchases the service from the private sector through a long-term agreement. Then there is divestiture by license or a sale. So in this case, a private entity buys an equity stake in a state-owned enterprise, but the private stake may or may not imply private management of the enterprise. So then again, there are examples of joint venture also, where uh, the infrastructure or the asset is co-owned by both the public sector and the private sector operator. It does not belong to either the private sector only or the public sector only. So under a joint venture, public and private sector partners can either form a new company or assume joint ownership of an existing company through a sale of shares to one or several private investors. Okay, moving on to the next question, which is in the context of municipal accounts, what does NMAM stand for? And we have four options: National Municipal Accounts Monitoring, National Municipal Accounts Management, National Municipal Accounts Manual, National Municipal Accounts Mission. Okay. So I won't tell you the full form, but I'll tell you what this question is referring to. So, as you might remember, that as a part of the reform agenda of the JNNURM, an accounting reform was also introduced, and the accounting reform was considered as a mandated reforms for the municipalities. It was believed that accounting reform not only will make uh, will have more or better financial accountability and transparency for the municipalities or for the financial dealings of the municipalities, but it will also help the municipality to better assess their assets and liabilities as well as their income and expenditure. And if the municipalities are able to assess their assets, liabilities, income, and expenditure well, in effect, it will help them prepare a sound database for all accounting matters and make the municipal governments credit worthy. So, if the municipal governments are credit worthy, they can then access the capital market to seek loans or seek financial funding to fund their municipal uh, functions, their projects. So, among many other initiatives taken by the MOUD for good governance was the creation of a model accounts and financing reporting manual in order to help the municipalities create or follow an accounting reform for better accounting of their asset liabilities, incomes, and expenditures. So, this is what this question is referring to, and that is what NMAS is. We hope this is clear. The next question. So, this question asks if it is the role of state government to evolve a policy for private sector participation in municipal finance. Is it a true or false statement? So again, going back to the 74th CA, remember that 74th CA did directly suggest principles for fiscal devolution to urban governments, but it said that state finance commission should be established every 5 years by state governments along the lines of central finance commission, and then resource distribution and mobilization uh, or mobilization methods or further fiscal decentralization from the state government to the local governments will be done by the State Finance Commission. So, according to this, revenue raising and disbursement of funds for municipal finance is determined and regulated by the state government, and there is no divisible group of tax resources between the state and municipalities. Transfer to the municipalities is discretionary in nature and is done and regulated by the state itself. And because of this, particulars of municipal finance varies from state to state. So I hope this makes it clear if this statement is true or false. Okay, moving on to the next question, which was the first ULB in India to access the Indian capital market? And you have four options for four municipal corporations, which is Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi, and Ahmedabad. So I won't tell you which municipal corporation it was, but I'll tell you a little bit. I'll give you a little hint. Uh, so capital markets are basically markets that brings buyers and sellers together to trade stocks, bonds, currencies, and other financial assets. And capital markets includes stock market and bond market. And the municipal corporations who are credit worthy, they can seek credit or seek loans to fund their projects from this capital market in the form of either equities or bonds. And the first Indian municipal corporation to do this did it using their municipal credit rating in 1996, and the first municipal bond without the support of state government or without the state government as a guarantee was sanctioned in 1998, which was for rupees 100 crore. So you have to now just find out which municipal corporation it is. So I hope that is clear. Now we move on to the next question. So the next question is, consider the following sources of revenue for urban local bodies and choose the option which consists all the direct sources of revenue for ULBs. So first is the value added tax or VAT. Second is the goods and services tax or GST. Third is the property tax, and fourth is the income tax. So if you remember this chart from uh, lectures, so you can see these are all the resources available at the central level, state level, or from capital grants or loans. These are all the revenue resources available to the ULPs or the local. So their own revenue sources, uh, uh, so revenue from tax sources, non-tax sources, and user charges. So here we are largely talking about tax sources. You can see the tax sources. The ULPs have property tax, entertainment tax, octroi, and vehicle tax. There are other sources also, non-tax sources like fees, fines, licenses, land development and readjustment charges, extraction charges, etc. Also, user charges for the local government sometimes levies some user charges for operating certain infrastructure or providing certain services, which is used by the citizens. So, as end users, and they pay some sort of user charge to the local government for using those infrastructure services. Then the local government can get loans and grants from either public sector or private sector, and then it receives some shared taxes from the government, tax share. So here we are largely talking about the local body's own revenue resources, which comes from tax, and that pertains to this question. I hope we can now clearly identify which of these taxes uh, are is a direct source or are a direct source of revenues for the urban. So the last question for today is that select any two most feasible options for ULB for accessing a capital. Have the options equity, bonds, centrally sponsored schemes, PFDF, and contracting, and bank finance. So PFDF, I do not remember the full form, but it is something related to finance where state and the local government they together as states while state supports the local government, they seek finance from the capital market, where state uh, as we saw here, where the state governments act as a guarantee. So that is what PFDF is. So for this, you should again remember this table where you can see from the capital market, you can seek funding in the form of equity or in the form of bonds. From government incentives, you can seek fundings in the form of PFDF as we just mentioned and in centrally sponsored scheme, but these are from GOI incentives. But here we are talking about the capital market only. So you can see from the capital market, you can seek funding in form of either equity or bonds. So I hope it's clear to you now what are the correct options for this question. This is all for today, as this is the end of the questions. Thank you very much for listening to the presentations. We do not have a doubt clearing session as a part of this video. Doubt clearing session occurred as it occurs every week on Tuesday 6 to 8 p.m. But this week's or week 6's doubt clearing session could not be recorded because of some recording error that occurred with the recording sound. So if you still have any doubts related to this week's session or any of the subject material that we covered, feel free to ask in the next session. I'll be happy to take up any doubts. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll meet again in the next session next week Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you very much.